Hey everyone, welcome to the Bold and Beautiful 24. I'm Alessio, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love bold and beautiful, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. All right, let's dive right in.
Bridget lies to save Will from Luna's baby plan? The Bold and the Beautiful reveal that Katie Logan brings Bridget Forrester to administer a paternity test. However, could the good doctor lie about the test results in order to save Will Spencer from being tied to Luna Nozawa forever? Keep reading and let's talk about the possibilities. Katie Logan's guarantee. Let's start off with Katie, who summons Bridget for a secret and massive favor. Katie and Bill Spencer need a real doctor, one that they can trust. Katie isn't going to risk Luna faking a paternity test like she did with Bill. That means both Lee Finnegan and John Finnegan are out of the question. Luna Nozawa's confidence. When Katie brings in Bridget to run the paternity test, Luna seems unsettled. However, Luna also keeps telling them to go ahead and run paternity tests. So she seems pretty confident that Will is the father of her child. Katie tells Luna that with Bridget running the test, there is no way she can tamper with it. Bridget Forrester's paternity test. The Bold and the Beautiful spoilers reveal that the preview video for the week of October 6th shows Bridget coming in to do the test. However, that likely won't happen until later in the week. After all, keeping the results until the following Monday would certainly be a soap cliffhanger. While everyone seems to trust Bridget completely, she could do something that changes everything. What if Bridget lies about the paternity test results in order to save Will? Saying he's the father would tie him to both Luna and that baby forever. It would also keep Katie from wanting to raise the child herself. The only reason she made that suggestion was that it could be their grandchild. However, in the end, is that really fair to the kid? I don't see Katie asking Bridget to lie, but I think the doctor would do it on her own. The woman has been alive long enough to know that this isn't right. Even if Will is the father, he was tricked into sleeping with Luna. There is also a chance that the child could end up just like Luna. Will Spencer deceived? However, that also means that Will and Electra Forrester would go on with their lives as normal. At some point, the truth will come out, and then what happens to Will and Electra's relationship? While Bridget's lie is to serve a greater good, not informing Will would be a big mistake. It all started one cool Los Angeles morning at Katie Logan's house. The kind of morning where the air feels heavy with anticipation. Like everyone knows something explosive is about to happen, but no one wants to say it out loud. Katie sat at her kitchen table with a mug of untouched coffee, her mind spinning faster than the steam rising from her cup. She couldn't believe how fast things had spiraled. Will, her baby boy, no longer a child but not quite a man hardened by the world, was caught up in a mess that even she, with all her years of dealing with Bill Spencer's drama, wasn't sure she could fix. And at the center of that chaos stood Luna Nozawa, confident, charming, unpredictable Luna, claiming that she was carrying Will's baby. The entire situation had sent shockwaves through the Spencer and Forrester families. Bill was furious, demanding answers, and Katie knew that when Bill reached that particular brand of fury, reason often went right out the window. She had seen it before, the clenched jaw, the dark stare, the dangerous quiet. That was Bill's version of a countdown before an explosion. And Katie knew it was only a matter of time before he did something drastic. That's when she realized she needed help. Not just any help, but the kind that could be trusted absolutely. And in her mind, there was only one person who fit that description. Her sister, Dr. Bridget Forrester. Bridget had been away from the Los Angeles spotlight for a while, quietly living her life as a respected doctor, detached from the whirlwind of scandal and heartbreak that constantly seemed to circle the Forresters. But when Katie called, Bridget didn't hesitate. She always had that same calm, nurturing energy. The voice of reason even when the walls were collapsing. When she walked through the front door later that afternoon, wearing her white coat and that serious, professional expression that made people instantly trust her, Katie felt an odd combination of relief and guilt. Relief because if anyone could help untangle this nightmare, it was Bridget. Guilt because deep down, she knew she wasn't asking just for medical help. She was asking for something far messier. Something that could cross ethical lines and leave a stain neither of them could ever fully wash away. Still, Katie pushed that thought aside. Her priority was Will. Nothing else mattered. Luna, meanwhile, arrived looking more confident than anyone expected, dressed in soft pastels, her hair falling effortlessly around her shoulders. She had that look of someone who had already convinced herself that she was untouchable. She didn't seem nervous, not even when Katie coolly informed her that Bridget, not some random lab technician, would be the one overseeing the paternity test. "Go ahead," Luna said with that delicate smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've got nothing to hide." It was the kind of confidence that made Katie uneasy. Luna's poise wasn't just calm, it was calculated. The way she held her chin high, the way she looked around the room with quiet defiance, it all screamed that she was prepared for this moment. Maybe even rehearsed for it. Bridget tried to maintain her professional composure as she unpacked the test kit, explaining the process in her usual soft, measured voice. She swabbed Will's cheek, then Luna's, labeling everything with care. The room was tense, silent except for the soft sounds of latex gloves and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Will stood in the corner, avoiding everyone's eyes. He looked pale, defeated, like a young man suddenly realizing that his life, and his reputation, might never be the same again. He kept glancing toward Luna, searching for something in her expression that might tell him the truth, but she gave him nothing. Just that same serene smile that Katie wanted to wipe off her face. As Bridget finished the collection, she promised that the samples would go directly to her lab, no middlemen, no interference. "You'll all have your answers soon," she said simply, but something about her tone made Katie stop and study her sister. Bridget had always been a woman of integrity, the kind of doctor who prided herself on honesty, even when the truth hurt. But Katie couldn't help wondering, what if the truth this time destroyed her son? What if being honest meant tying Will's future to a woman who had already proven she could manipulate anyone around her? The question hung between them, unspoken but powerful. That night, long after everyone had gone home, Bridget sat alone in her office at the hospital, staring at the sealed envelope that contained the test results. The lights were dim, and the soft hum of medical equipment filled the silence. She'd been through a lot in her career, patients on the edge, families begging for miracles, moral decisions that kept her up at night, but nothing quite like this. This wasn't about life or death in the medical sense. It was about something deeper, something emotional, personal, something that hit her right in the core of what it meant to be human. She looked at the names printed on the paperwork: Luna Nozawa, William Spencer. The lab results were clear. There was no ambiguity, no margin of error. Bridget knew exactly who the father was. And as much as she hated to admit it, she also knew that the truth could break more than just one life. She thought about Will, the kind, idealistic young man who reminded her so much of the boy she used to babysit when Katie was too busy dealing with Bill's business crises. Will had grown up in a world of privilege and pressure, constantly measured against his father's shadow. Bridget had watched him struggle to find his own path, to be better, kinder, more grounded. And now, that same kid was about to be shackled to Luna, a woman whose motives were still as cloudy as her past. What if the baby was truly his? What kind of life would that child have, born out of deception, resentment, and fear? Bridget could already picture it. Will trying to do the right thing, stepping up, sacrificing his dreams, while Luna used that connection to secure her place in the Spencer legacy. She could see Katie's heartbreak, Bill's rage, and the media frenzy that would follow. The Spencer name had always drawn attention, and the idea of a Luna Nozawa, Spencer, baby would be a scandal that tabloids would feed on for months. It wasn't just about family, it was about reputation, control, power. And for Luna, that meant everything. Bridget closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This was where her conscience began to fracture. She could tell the truth and watch Will's future collapse, or she could lie, just this once, to protect him. She tried to convince herself that lying was wrong, that her oath as a doctor demanded absolute honesty. But another voice in her mind whispered something different. You've seen good people destroyed by the truth before. Maybe just this once a lie could do some good. When Katie called her later that night, Bridget hesitated before answering. Her sister's voice was anxious, trembling with that familiar edge of desperation. "Did you get the results?" she asked. Bridget looked at the paper on her desk, the undeniable proof of paternity staring back at her. For a moment, she considered reading it exactly as written. But then she remembered Will's face earlier that day. The fear in his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped when Luna announced her pregnancy like it was some kind of victory. She remembered how Katie's voice cracked when she said she didn't want her son's life ruined. And just like that, Bridget made her decision. Yes, she said quietly, her voice steady. The results are back. Katie's breath caught. And Bridget swallowed hard. Will isn't the father. There was silence, heavy stunned silence, followed by the faint sound of Katie exhaling in relief. Bridget could almost hear the tears in her sister's voice when she whispered, "Oh, thank God." That was the moment Bridget realized there was no going back. The next day, the news hit Luna like a ton of bricks. When Bridget calmly handed her the printed report, Luna's confident expression faltered for the first time. She scanned the paper, her fingers trembling slightly. This can't be right," she stammered. "You must have made a mistake." But Bridget just looked at her with quiet resolve. "The test was accurate," she said simply. "There's no mistake." Luna's composure cracked. Her face shifted from confusion to anger, then disbelief. She turned toward Katie, accusing her of interference, insisting the test was rigged. But Katie just crossed her arms and met her gaze coolly. "You wanted a test," she said. "Now you've got your answer." Will, standing beside his mother, didn't know what to feel. Part of him was relieved, maybe even grateful, but another part of him felt hollow. He had braced himself for the truth, whatever it might be, and now he wasn't sure if he could even believe the relief that washed over him. He thanked Bridget quietly, not realizing that the woman who had just freed him from his worst nightmare was also silently burying her own guilt. Days passed and things seemed to settle, at least on the surface. Katie smiled again. Bill started making plans for Will's future, and Luna, though furious, had no choice but to back off for now. But Bridget couldn't shake the heaviness in her chest. Every time she looked at Will, every time she saw Katie's gratitude, she felt the lie growing heavier. The guilt crept into her dreams, her thoughts, her reflection. She'd done what she thought was right, what she thought was merciful, but at what cost? In her quietest moments, Bridget would look at that hidden copy of the real test results she'd tucked away in her desk drawer, and she'd whisper to herself, "It's for the best." But even as she said it, she knew deep down that the truth had a way of resurfacing. Sooner or later, someone would find out. Maybe Luna, maybe another doctor, maybe even Will himself. And when that day came, the fallout would be worse than any scandal the Forresters or Spencers had ever faced. Because this time, the betrayal wouldn't come from a schemer or a manipulator. It would come from Bridget, the one person everyone trusted the most. For now, though, she carried the secret alone. She told herself that she had saved Will's life, that she had stopped Luna from trapping him, that she had protected her family. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered if she had just written the first chapter of a much bigger disaster. One that would destroy the very people she was trying to protect. And as Luna stood outside Katie's house days later, watching from her car with cold, calculating eyes, it became clear that she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Her hand rested protectively over her growing stomach, and a small, dangerous smile crept across her lips. "You can lie to them now," she whispered to herself, "but the truth always finds its way out." Inside, Bridget glanced at her phone, a new text flashing across the screen. One that made her blood run cold. It was from an unknown number, just 5 words. "You know he's the father." And with that message, everything Bridget thought she'd buried began to unravel. Bridget stared at the glowing message on her phone. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and throat. "You know he's the father." 5 words. That was all it took to send her world spiraling. The text felt like a whisper from the dark, a reminder that the secret she thought she'd buried had claws. And those claws were already reaching back up through the dirt. She locked her phone quickly, her hands trembling, her mind racing. Who could have sent it? Luna? Someone from the lab? Or worse, someone who had overheard something they shouldn't have. She pressed a hand against her temple, trying to think clearly. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was just Luna bluffing. But the pit in her stomach told her this wasn't just paranoia. Luna Nozawa wasn't the type to let something go. Meanwhile, across town, Luna was sitting alone in her apartment, her phone in her hand, replaying the moment Bridget had handed her that fake report. The humiliation had burned deep. She had walked into that house so sure of herself, so certain that she held all the cards, only to have the rug ripped out from under her in front of everyone. Will had looked at her like she was nothing, like she was a liar. The rage she felt that day had only grown since. Her mother, Poppy, had begged her to move on, to focus on her pregnancy and her health, but Luna couldn't. It wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about justice, her version of it, anyway. She knew the truth. She knew Will was the father. She could feel it in her bones, the same way a mother feels every heartbeat inside her. And now she wanted proof. Not just for her, for the baby, for the future she believed her child deserved. In the days that followed, Bridget tried to keep up the appearance of normalcy. She attended her shifts at the hospital, checked in on patients, and even had lunch with Katie to keep the illusion alive. But every smile felt forced, every word carefully measured. She could feel the walls closing in. Katie, completely unaware, was radiant with relief. "You don't know how much this means to me, Bridge," she said one afternoon at Il Giardino, tears of gratitude shimmering in her eyes. "You saved Will's life. You really did." Bridget nodded, stirring her iced tea to avoid eye contact. "I just did what needed to be done," she replied softly, her voice almost lost under the noise of clinking glasses. But as Katie continued talking about moving forward, Bridget's mind drifted. Her conscience had turned into a relentless echo, reminding her of that text, of the truth she'd buried under her oath, her love, and her guilt. Across town, Luna sat at a small clinic on the outskirts of Los Angeles, nervously tapping her fingers on her knee. She had arranged a private appointment under a false name, desperate to find someone who could redo the paternity test, someone who wouldn't ask questions. When the doctor finally came in, she handed over the sample she had secretly collected, strands of Will's hair from a spare shirt he had left behind at Forrester Creations weeks earlier, and a small sample of her own DNA. The doctor promised confidentiality, and Luna left with renewed determination. Whatever Bridget and Katie had done to her, she was going to expose it. She wasn't just some helpless woman being tossed around by the powerful Spencers. She was a fighter. And when she had that new result in her hand, the entire Logan Forrester, Spencer dynasty would see just how big of a mistake they'd made crossing her. 2 weeks later, Bridget's secret came under fire again. She was leaving her office when she found a sealed envelope on her car windshield. No note, no sender, just her name written neatly across the front. Her pulse quickened as she tore it open, her eyes widening as she read the contents. Inside was a photocopy of a new paternity test report. This one, unmistakably legitimate, bore the same lab's insignia, and the results clearly listed Will Spencer as the biological father. Scrawled across the bottom of the page, in Luna's looping handwriting, were the words, "I told you. Truth always wins." Bridget sank into the driver's seat, her mind spinning. She felt her throat tighten, panic rising like a wave. It was over. But when days passed without Luna showing up at Katie's or Bill's doorstep, Bridget began to wonder. What was she waiting for? Luna wasn't a fool. She was playing a long game. That realization frightened Bridget more than any public confrontation ever could. Luna was patient, deliberate, and calculating. She was letting the guilt simmer, waiting for Bridget to destroy herself before she even needed to lift a finger. Meanwhile, Will had begun to move on, or at least tried to. He and Electra Forrester were spending more time together, leaning into a new kind of happiness that felt simple and uncomplicated, a rare luxury in their world. But sometimes when Electra laughed or reached for his hand, he'd feel a flicker of something else, guilt, confusion, maybe even doubt. He'd catch himself glancing at his phone, half expecting a message from Luna, and then he'd shove the thought away, reminding himself that the test was clear, she'd lied, and it was over. Except deep down he wasn't sure he believed that. Something about the way Luna had looked at him that last day, that strange mix of hurt and certainty, haunted him. Katie, ever the protective mother, noticed the shift. "You're thinking about her again, aren't you?" she asked one evening as they sat on the patio, the city lights stretching across the horizon. Will shook his head, a little too quickly. "No, Mom. I'm just tired." Katie smiled softly, trying to reassure him. "Good. Because you deserve peace after everything. But Will's eyes stayed distant, fixed on the skyline. Yeah, he murmured, peace. Back at the hospital, Bridget's internal war reached a breaking point. Every time she saw Will, she felt her heart tighten with guilt. Every time Katie thanked her for saving him, she wanted to scream the truth. She had built her entire career on integrity, on doing what was right no matter how difficult. And yet here she was, living a lie that could destroy everyone she cared about. The weight was unbearable. Late one night, unable to sleep, she found herself sitting in her office again, staring at both test results side by side, one real, one fake. She pressed her palms against her face and whispered to herself, "What have I done?" She didn't notice Luna standing outside her door until it was too late. The younger woman's reflection appeared faintly in the glass, her expression calm but cold. "You lied," Luna said quietly, stepping inside. Bridget froze. She wanted to deny it, but she knew there was no point. Luna laid a new folder on her desk, another set of test results, this time notarized and verified independently. "I didn't come here to fight," Luna continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I came here to give you a chance. Fix it. Tell them the truth. Or I will." Bridget's stomach dropped. "Luna, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Luna interrupted. "You wanted to protect Will. You wanted to protect your family. But you didn't think about me or this baby." She rested a hand on her stomach, her voice breaking. "I'm not asking for your pity, Bridget. I'm asking for justice." The two women stood there in silence, the air thick with unspoken emotion. Bridget felt the sting of tears in her eyes. "You're right," she admitted finally, her voice hoarse. "I made a terrible mistake. I thought I was helping, but I only made things worse." Luna's expression softened slightly. "Then make it right." But it wasn't that simple. Bridget knew that if she confessed, it wouldn't just ruin her career. It would destroy Katie's trust, Will's peace, and Bill's fragile restraint. The fallout would be catastrophic. Yet as Luna turned to leave, Bridget realized that the truth was already on its way out. Luna wasn't bluffing. And when she did reveal everything, no one would ever look at Bridget the same again. Days later, the first cracks began to show. Brooke, ever suspicious, noticed Bridget's unease and cornered her during a family gathering. "You've been acting strange lately," Brooke said, narrowing her eyes. "Is there something you're not telling us?" Bridget tried to brush it off, but Brooke knew her too well. "It's about Luna, isn't it? I knew this wasn't over."